Standing in the hallway of my own apartment at 2 in the morning, I froze as my mother's whisper cut through the darkness like a blade. She's just our golden goose. Once she signs it over for our retirement fund, we can finally be free of her. I'm so tired of pretending to care about her boring job stories and relationship drama. The devastating realization hit me like a freight train. Everything I believed about my loving, supportive family was an elaborate lie designed to exploit my success and generosity. 18 months earlier, I had walked through the same apartment with such pride, my heart swelling as I imagined my family's faces when I surprised them. The downtown luxury unit had cost me every penny of my savings, plus a hefty mortgage, but I convinced myself it was an investment in both my future and theirs. The gleaming hardwood floors, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city skyline, and granite countertops in the gourmet kitchen felt like tangible proof of how far I had climbed from our modest suburban upbringing. My family's initial reaction had been lukewarm at best. Dad questioned whether I could really afford such an extravagant purchase, while Mom worried about me taking on too much debt. Jessica, my older sister, seemed more interested in scrolling through her phone than touring the space I was so excited to show them. But everything changed when they learned about the neighborhood's skyrocketing property values and prime location near the financial district. Within weeks, circumstances seemed to align perfectly for them to move in temporarily. Dad's accounting firm had downsized, eliminating his position after 23 years of dedicated service. The severance package was modest, and finding new employment proved challenging for a 57-year-old in a field increasingly dominated by younger graduates with fresh technology skills. Mom had taken early retirement from her elementary school teaching position, claiming the stress was affecting her blood pressure and overall health. Then Jessica's marriage imploded spectacularly. Her husband Bradley had allegedly been having an affair with a coworker, leaving Jessica devastated and financially vulnerable with her twin daughters Emma and Sophie, only 8 years old. The divorce proceedings were messy and expensive, draining what little savings she had accumulated. She needed somewhere safe and stable for the girls during this turbulent transition period. I became their savior, working 80-hour weeks at my marketing firm to maintain the lifestyle they had grown accustomed to in my apartment. Every morning I would leave my cramped studio apartment across town, where I had moved to give them space, and drive through rush-hour traffic to pick up coffee and pastries for their breakfast. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was surviving on vending machine snacks and convenience store coffee, while ensuring they had organic produce, premium cuts of meat, and imported cheese delivered daily. Their gratitude felt genuine and overwhelming. Dad would hug me tightly every Friday when I stopped by with groceries, telling me I was the rock holding our family together during these difficult times. Mom would tear up, describing how blessed she felt to have such a generous daughter who understood the importance of family unity. Jessica constantly reminded me that I was giving her daughters stability during the most chaotic period of their young lives. The apartment transformed into a showcase of comfortable living that I could barely afford. Premium cable packages provided hundreds of channels they browsed through leisurely. A twice-weekly housekeeping service kept every surface spotless, while I scrubbed my own small bathroom with dollar store cleaning supplies. They ordered gourmet meals from upscale restaurants while I survived on instant ramen and whatever free food appeared in the office break room during client meetings. I told myself their happiness was worth my exhaustion. Coming home to their warm greetings and hearing about their relaxed days filled some hollow space inside me that work could never satisfy. Dad had started taking long walks through the nearby parks, something his previous stressful schedule never allowed. Mom was pursuing watercolor painting, having converted my intended home office into an art studio filled with expensive brushes and professional-grade paints. Jessica was healing emotionally while exploring online college courses to update her skills for eventual employment. My own life became increasingly narrow and regimented. Work consumed most of my waking hours as I pushed myself to excel, earning bonuses and commissions that immediately disappeared into maintaining their lifestyle. My social circle shrank as I had less time and energy for friendships that didn't directly support my family obligations. Dating became impossible when every spare moment was spent either working or managing their needs. The exhaustion was beginning to affect my performance, but I attributed it to the temporary nature of their situation. Dad would find new employment soon, Mom would recover her health and perhaps return to substitute teaching, and Jessica would finalize her divorce and establish independent housing. Everything would return to normal and our family would be stronger for having weathered this crisis together. But that credit card statement changed everything. Hidden among my own bills was an account I didn't recognize addressed to the apartment but bearing Jessica's name. The monthly charges totaled over $8,000, featuring luxury spa treatments, high-end boutique purchases, premium wine deliveries, and concert tickets. The dates corresponded exactly with the weekend. I had worked around the clock preparing a crucial presentation for our biggest client, surviving on 3 hours of sleep and coffee shop sandwiches. While I was sacrificing everything to provide for them, they were living more lavishly than I ever had, even during my most successful months. The receipt for the weekend spa retreat was dated the same Saturday I had collapsed in my office chair, too exhausted to drive home safely. They had been relaxing in luxury while I pushed myself to the breaking point to fund their comfort. The following morning brought clarity like a cold splash of water to the face. I called in sick to work for the first time in 2 years and spent the day conducting my own investigation into exactly how my generosity had been manipulated. The financial records I discovered in my online banking history painted a picture of systematic exploitation that left me nauseous with betrayal. Marcus, my closest colleague and one of the few friends I still maintained regular contact with, met me for lunch at a quiet cafe downtown. His expression grew increasingly concerned as I outlined what I had uncovered, but his response surprised me completely. "Robyn, I've been worried about this for months," he said, stirring his coffee nervously. "Your whole personality changed after they moved in. You stopped joining us for happy hour, declined every invitation to weekend events, and whenever someone asked about your family, you'd get this strange defensive tone." I pressed him for details, learning that several mutual friends had expressed concerns about my increasingly isolated behavior. Apparently, my family had been monitoring my social interactions more closely than I realized. When coworkers called the apartment looking for me, Jessica would often take messages with promises to relay them that never materialized. Plans I thought friends had forgotten or lost interest in had actually been canceled by family members speaking on my behalf. "Your sister called Tom's wife last month." Marcus continued, referring to another colleague from our department. "She said you were going through a stressful period and might not be thinking clearly about social commitments. She suggested people give you some space while you worked through whatever personal issues you were dealing with." The realization that they had been systematically isolating me from my support network made my hands shake with anger. But Marcus had more disturbing information to share. During a company barbecue I had missed, due to a family obligation, he overheard several people discussing my changed behavior and speculating about potential personal problems that might be affecting my judgment. That afternoon, I drove to Jessica's supposed temporary housing situation to verify her story about the messy divorce. The address she had given led to an upscale townhouse development where I discovered her husband Bradley working in the front yard, very much present and accounted for. Their marriage was intact, and they had purchased the property 6 months earlier as an investment, using funds Jessica had borrowed from my emergency savings account under false pretenses. When I confronted Bradley, his confusion was genuine. Jessica had told him the loan was for a business opportunity, and that I was fully aware of their real living situation. He assumed I was simply helping them build wealth while they maintained the apartment as a city residence for convenience. The story about their crumbling marriage and her desperate need for shelter was a complete fabrication designed to manipulate my emotions. Back at the apartment, I began searching through personal belongings with fresh eyes. Dad's unemployment story unraveled when I found business cards for a consulting firm where he had been working under the table for months, collecting both unreported income and unemployment benefits. His alleged job search consisted entirely of interviews for positions he had no intention of accepting, maintaining his eligibility for government assistance while earning additional money through cash transactions that avoided tax reporting. Mom's art supplies told their own story. The expensive brushes, canvases, and paint sets filling my former office were purchased with proceeds from selling my business gifts and professional wardrobe items. Clients had given me luxury items like designer scarves, premium skincare sets, and high-end electronics that I rarely used, but kept out of appreciation for their generosity. All of these items had been systematically sold online, with Mom pocketing the profits while claiming she was simply decluttering to help me maintain a more organized living space. The psychological manipulation became clearer as I reflected on recent conversations with my family. They had been expertly undermining my confidence and decision-making abilities through subtle criticism and concern trolling. Comments about my appearance suggested I was neglecting self-care due to work stress. Questions about my dating life implied that my single status indicated poor judgment in relationships. Their expressed worry about my long work hours framed my professional dedication as an unhealthy obsession that was preventing me from building a balanced life. Every achievement I shared was met with gentle warnings about burning out or taking on too much responsibility. Every social invitation I declined to spend time with them was praised as evidence that I understood the importance of family relationships over superficial friendships. They had been systematically eroding my sense of independence while positioning themselves as the only reliable source of emotional support in my increasingly narrow world. The most chilling discovery came when I found legal documents hidden in Dad's desk drawer. He had been consulting with a family law attorney about procedures for obtaining guardianship or conservatorship over an adult child experiencing mental health difficulties. The paperwork included detailed notes about my work schedule, social isolation, financial responsibilities, and emotional state. They had been building a case to have me declared mentally incompetent if I ever refused their demands or attempted to establish boundaries around my financial support. The attorney's notes referenced a potential scenario involving fabricated medical emergencies that would require immediate access to my assets for family members acting as caregivers. The documentation suggested strategies for demonstrating my inability to make rational financial decisions during periods of stress, with particular attention to my tendency toward self-sacrifice and people-pleasing behaviors that could be reframed as signs of mental instability. The next several days passed in a blur of emotional devastation as I processed the full scope of their deception. I found myself unable to eat, sleep, or concentrate on work tasks that had once engaged my complete attention. My supervisor noticed my declining performance but attributed it to seasonal stress that affected many employees during busy periods. The irony that my family's manipulation was now threatening my professional stability felt like another layer of their betrayal. Marcus became my lifeline during this period, providing emotional support while helping me understand the psychological dynamics at play. He recommended several books about emotional abuse and financial exploitation that opened my eyes to patterns I had completely missed. The love bombing phase, where they overwhelmed me with gratitude and affection, followed by increasing demands, justified through manufactured crises, fit textbook descriptions of manipulative family systems. My attempts to reach out to extended family members revealed the depth of their character assassination campaign. Aunt Patricia, my mother's sister, expressed surprise at my call and mentioned that Mom had been sharing concerns about my mental health for several months. Apparently, I had been described as increasingly paranoid, financially reckless, and emotionally unstable due to work pressures and social isolation. Cousin David, who had always been close to our family, had been told that I was exhibiting controlling behaviors and making unreasonable demands about how they should live their lives. The narrative painted me as someone whose professional success had created an inflated ego and unrealistic expectations about gratitude for my financial support. They had positioned themselves as victims of my generosity, burdened by obligations to appreciate my help while walking on eggshells around my volatile emotions. The text message exchanges between Jessica and Mom that I discovered on an old tablet were particularly revealing. Their conversations discussed timing strategies for major requests, methods for triggering my guilt responses, and backup plans if I ever began questioning their stories. They had been treating my emotional manipulation like a business project, analyzing my behavioral patterns, and developing increasingly sophisticated approaches to maintain control. One conversation thread focused on my dating life and strategies for sabotaging potential relationships that might interfere with their access to my resources. They had been monitoring my social media activities and deliberately creating family emergencies during periods when I seemed to be developing romantic connections. The weekend I had planned to attend a coworker's wedding with a colleague I was interested in was derailed by Mom's fabricated heart palpitations that required immediate family support. They discussed my physical appearance and energy levels with clinical detachment, noting that my increasing exhaustion and stress were making me less attractive and socially confident, which served their purposes by reducing the likelihood that I would develop relationships outside their influence. The conversations included crude jokes about my declining appearance and speculation about how long they could maintain the current arrangement before I became completely isolated and dependent on them for social interaction. The financial records painted an even more disturbing picture. They had been systematically inflating household expenses and creating false emergencies that required immediate cash contributions from me. The apartment's utility bills were artificially high because they kept the temperature at luxury resort levels year-round. Grocery expenses were inflated through premium organic products and frequent restaurant orders that they justified as necessary for Mom's dietary restrictions and Jessica's daughter's nutritional needs. Most shocking was the discovery that they had been documenting my stress responses and emotional reactions to their various manufactured crises. Dad kept detailed notes about my sleep patterns, work schedule, social interactions, and financial decisions. The documentation was clearly intended to support future claims about my mental capacity and decision-making abilities if they ever needed to pursue legal guardianship. They had been consulting with a psychiatrist who specialized in family intervention cases involving successful adults whose families believed they were making poor life choices. The doctor's preliminary assessment, based entirely on their descriptions of my behavior, suggested that I might be experiencing work-related stress that was affecting my judgment and emotional regulation. The recommendation was for a family meeting where concerned relatives could present evidence of my need for professional mental health support. The plan they were developing involved staging an intervention where they would present their documentation of my declining mental health and demand that I sign over financial control to them temporarily while receiving psychiatric treatment. The legal paperwork was already prepared, requiring only my signature to transfer property ownership and financial assets to a family trust administered by Dad and Mom. Their timeline was aggressive and specific. They planned to schedule the intervention for the following week, using a fabricated crisis involving Mom's health as the trigger for demanding immediate legal and financial changes. The psychiatrist would be present to provide professional validation for their concerns, and they had already contacted a notary who specialized in emergency document signings for families dealing with mental health crises. The cruelest aspect of their plan was the inclusion of Jessica's daughters in the emotional manipulation. Emma and Sophie would be present during the intervention to provide testimony about how my stress and erratic behavior were affecting their sense of security in the apartment. The girls had been coached to describe incidents where I seemed angry or upset, reframing my legitimate exhaustion as frightening emotional outbursts that made them worry about their safety. The emotional weight of these discoveries was beginning to manifest in physical symptoms that validated their narrative about my declining mental health. I experienced panic attacks during routine work meetings, found myself unable to concentrate on projects that required sustained attention, and struggled with insomnia that left me exhausted and irritable during the day. The supreme irony that their psychological abuse was creating the very symptoms they planned to use as evidence of my mental instability felt like a masterpiece of manipulation. My work performance continued to deteriorate as the stress affected my ability to manage complex client relationships and meet project deadlines. During a particularly important presentation to potential investors, I found myself stumbling over words and losing my train of thought, behaviors completely unlike my usual professional competence. My supervisor scheduled a meeting to discuss performance concerns, asking whether personal issues were affecting my work quality. The conversation with my boss revealed another layer of my family's manipulation. He mentioned receiving several calls from concerned relatives who wanted to ensure that workplace stress wasn't contributing to my personal difficulties. Jessica had contacted Human Resources to express worry about my long hours and intense work schedule, suggesting that the company might want to monitor my well-being more closely to avoid potential liability issues if my health deteriorated further. That evening, Jessica orchestrated what seemed like a spontaneous family dinner featuring her daughters and their favorite homemade pizza. The gathering felt warm and natural until I noticed how carefully choreographed every interaction had become. Emma and Sophie were unusually affectionate, climbing onto my lap and telling me how much they loved living in the beautiful apartment I had provided for them. Their innocent comments revealed coaching that chilled me to the bone. Sophie mentioned how scary it was when adults seemed angry or upset, while Emma talked about feeling safe when families stayed together and took care of each other. Jessica guided the conversation toward topics like family loyalty, the importance of making good decisions for everyone's benefit, and how sometimes people need help from the people who love them most. The emotional manipulation was sophisticated and devastating. They were using children's genuine affection for me as a weapon, while simultaneously preparing them to serve as witnesses against my mental capacity. The realization that they were willing to traumatize Emma and Sophie to achieve their financial goals revealed a level of callousness that shattered any remaining hope for reconciling our relationship. 2 days later, Mom staged her most elaborate performance yet. She called me at work, claiming to be experiencing chest pains and difficulty breathing symptoms that could indicate a heart attack requiring immediate medical attention. I raced from the office to find her collapsed dramatically on the apartment's sofa, surrounded by concerned neighbors who had been summoned to witness her medical emergency. The ambulance ride to the hospital provided the perfect setting for emotional manipulation. Mom clutched my hand while expressing fears about our family's future if something happened to her. She worried aloud about Dad's ability to manage finances and Jessica's ongoing struggles as a single mother. Between gasps for breath, she mentioned the importance of having legal paperwork in order so that family members could take care of each other during medical emergencies. The hospital tests revealed no signs of cardiac distress or any other medical emergency. The attending physician suggested that stress and anxiety might have caused her symptoms, recommending follow-up appointments with her primary care doctor and possibly a mental health professional to address underlying issues. Mom's recovery was remarkably swift once the doctor confirmed she wasn't experiencing a life-threatening condition. The drive home provided the perfect opportunity for her to introduce the topic of advance directives and emergency financial planning. She had brought legal documents with her to the hospital, explaining that the health scare had reminded her how important it was for families to prepare for unexpected events. The paperwork required my signature as the primary financial provider, giving her and Dad temporary authority to access my accounts if medical situations prevented me from managing my own affairs. That evening, the family gathered for what they called a crisis meeting about our collective financial security. Dad presented a detailed analysis of household expenses and future projections, demonstrating how my current income was barely sufficient to maintain their lifestyle while building adequate savings for genuine emergencies. His solution involved consolidating our resources under a family trust that would provide better financial management and tax advantages for everyone involved. Jessica contributed emotional testimony about the challenges of rebuilding her life as a single mother and the crucial stability my apartment provided for her daughter's emotional development. She emphasized how disruptive it would be for Emma and Sophie to face another major housing change while they were still adjusting to their parents' separation. The implication was clear that any changes to our current arrangement would traumatize innocent children who had already endured enough upheaval. The meeting concluded with their presentation of a comprehensive plan for transferring ownership of the apartment to the family trust while maintaining my residence rights as the primary income contributor. They had consulted with financial advisors and legal experts who confirmed that this arrangement would provide better asset protection and estate planning benefits for everyone involved. All that remained was scheduling the paperwork completion with a notary who specialized in family financial planning. But my investigation had prepared me for this moment. I knew about their secret meetings with attorneys and psychiatrists. I understood their timeline and the role each family member was playing in this elaborate deception. Most importantly, I had been documenting everything they thought was happening in secret, building my own case file that would expose their fraud before they could execute their final betrayal. The next morning brought a clarity I hadn't experienced in months, as if emerging from a fog that had clouded my judgment and emotional responses. Finding their detailed timeline for taking control of my assets had triggered something fierce and protective within me, a survival instinct that overrode the people-pleasing tendencies they had exploited so successfully. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt genuinely angry rather than confused and hurt. Marcus helped me locate a family law attorney who specialized in financial abuse cases, a recommendation that came through his wife's work at a domestic violence advocacy center. Attorney Sarah Chen had spent 15 years helping victims of economic exploitation, particularly cases involving family members who used emotional manipulation to gain control over relatives' assets and decision-making abilities. The consultation revealed that my situation was disturbingly common among successful adults whose families viewed their achievements as resources to be harvested rather than accomplishments to be celebrated. Sarah explained the legal frameworks around financial abuse and the specific challenges of proving manipulation when perpetrators were skilled at creating documentation that supported their version of events. Most importantly, Sarah confirmed that the forged signatures on documents I had discovered were criminal offenses that could result in fraud charges against Dad. The guardianship petition they were preparing contained false statements about my mental health and financial capacity that constituted perjury. Their plan to use fabricated medical emergencies to force legal document signings could be prosecuted as conspiracy to commit fraud and elderly abuse despite my age, because the same laws protected vulnerable adults of any age from exploitation by family members. The legal strategy we developed required careful evidence gathering while maintaining the appearance that I remained unaware of their plans. Sarah recommended installing security cameras in the apartment to document their actual behavior when they believed they were unobserved. The recordings would provide crucial evidence of their genuine attitudes toward me and their strategies for maintaining control over my resources. Over the following days, I systematically documented every aspect of their deception while pretending to cooperate with their timeline for the property transfer. I met with their recommended financial advisor, who was clearly in on their scheme, and presented misleading information about the tax benefits of transferring assets to family trusts. I scheduled appointments with the psychiatrist they had selected, who seemed predetermined to diagnose me with stress-related mental health issues that would support their guardianship petition. The security cameras revealed conversations that exceeded even my worst expectations about their true feelings toward me. Mom complained bitterly about having to pretend interest in my work stories and relationship concerns, describing my personal updates as tedious obligations she endured to maintain my emotional dependence. Dad discussed strategies for gradually reducing my access to my own financial accounts once the property transfer was completed, ensuring that I remained financially dependent on their goodwill. Jessica's recordings were particularly devastating. She laughed about my naivete and described me as pathetically desperate for family approval, making it easy to manipulate my emotions through manufactured crises and false gratitude. Her comments about using Emma and Sophie as emotional leverage revealed a callousness that made my stomach turn, particularly when she joked about how gullible I was about children's supposedly innocent observations that were actually carefully rehearsed performances. But the cameras also captured something else that would prove crucial to my legal case. They documented the family's discussions about their timeline for having me committed to psychiatric care once they gained control of my assets. The plan involved gradually escalating their claims about my mental instability until they could justify involuntary commitment for my own safety and the protection of other family members. Their strategy included specific triggers they would use to provoke emotional responses they could characterize as dangerous or irrational. They planned to create situations where my legitimate anger at their betrayal could be reframed as evidence of mental illness requiring immediate intervention. The recordings captured detailed discussions about which psychiatric facilities would be most suitable for long-term care that would prevent me from interfering with their management of my assets. During this period of evidence gathering, I also began reconnecting with friends and colleagues who had been gradually pushed out of my life through my family's manipulation. The conversations revealed the extent to which they had been controlling my social interactions and isolating me from potential support networks. Many people had wanted to maintain our friendships but had been discouraged by family members who claimed I was going through a difficult period and needed space. Tom from work had tried to invite me to several social gatherings, but Jessica had intercepted his calls and explained that I was dealing with personal issues and might not be comfortable in social situations. Sarah from college had reached out multiple times through social media only to be told by Mom that I was too busy with work commitments to maintain friendships and found social obligations stressful. The pattern was consistent and deliberate. Anyone who might have noticed changes in my behavior or questioned my family's version of events had been systematically excluded from my life through lies and manipulation. They had created a social vacuum around me that made their control seem natural and necessary rather than abusive and exploitative. My therapist, Dr. Amanda Rodriguez, helped me understand the psychological dynamics that had made me vulnerable to this type of exploitation. My childhood role as the family peacemaker and my professional success had created a perfect storm of people-pleasing tendencies and financial resources that made me an ideal target for manipulation. The gradual escalation of their demands had prevented me from recognizing the abuse until it reached criminal proportions. But therapy also helped me develop strategies for reclaiming my emotional and financial independence. Dr. Rodriguez taught me techniques for managing the anxiety and panic attacks that were resulting from chronic stress, while also helping me understand that my family's behavior reflected their character flaws rather than any inadequacy on my part. The most crucial insight was recognizing that genuine family relationships were based on mutual respect and support rather than one-sided financial obligations. Healthy families celebrated each other's successes without viewing them as resources to be exploited. Real love didn't require constant proof through financial sacrifice or tolerance of manipulative behavior. As the date approached for their planned intervention and property transfer, I felt a calm determination replacing the confusion and self-doubt that had paralyzed me for months. Sarah had prepared all the necessary legal documentation to expose their fraud and protect my assets, while Dr. Rodriguez had helped me develop emotional strategies for confronting their manipulation without being derailed by guilt or false obligations. The recordings from the security cameras provided irrefutable evidence of their true attitudes and criminal intentions. The forged documents established clear grounds for fraud charges. Most importantly, I had rebuilt enough of my support network to ensure that I wouldn't face this confrontation alone, or doubt my own perceptions when they inevitably tried to gaslight me about their motivations and behavior. Their golden goose was ready to fly, but first I was going to make sure they faced the consequences of their greed and manipulation. Justice would be served, but on my terms rather than theirs. The morning of their planned intervention arrived with deceptive normalcy. Mom prepared an elaborate breakfast, featuring all my favorite foods, commenting repeatedly about how important it was for families to share meals together during stressful periods. Dad reviewed financial documents at the kitchen table with theatrical concern, muttering about complex investment strategies and tax implications that required immediate professional attention. Jessica fussed over Emma and Sophie's appearance, explaining that they would be participating in an important family meeting about their future security and stability. I arrived at the apartment precisely on schedule, accompanied by my attorney Sarah Chen, my friend Marcus, and Detective Linda Morrison, who specialized in family financial crimes. Their shock at seeing my unexpected guests was immediately replaced by frantic attempts to maintain their carefully constructed narrative. Mom's first reaction was wounded confusion about why I would bring strangers to such an intimate family discussion. She expressed hurt that I didn't trust my own relatives enough to handle sensitive financial matters, privately suggesting that outside interference would only complicate situations that required family unity and understanding. Her performance was masterful, combining maternal disappointment with genuine-seeming concern about my judgment and emotional state. Dad's approach was more aggressive, demanding to know what authority these outsiders had to interfere in our family's personal business. He questioned Detective Morrison's credentials and challenged Sarah's understanding of our unique situation, insisting that legal professionals couldn't possibly comprehend the complex emotional dynamics involved in family financial planning. His indignation seemed authentic, as if he genuinely believed their manipulation was justified by their intentions to help me manage my resources more effectively. Jessica's contribution was the most sophisticated, focusing on the potential trauma this confrontation might cause Emma and Sophie. She suggested that hostile legal proceedings would damage the girls' sense of family security and trust, potentially requiring years of therapy to repair the psychological damage. Her implication was clear that I was prioritizing legal technicalities over the well-being of innocent children who needed stability and love, rather than courtroom battles and financial disputes. The turning point came when Sarah began presenting our evidence systematically. The security camera footage showing their private conversations about my gullibility and their plans for my psychiatric commitment was devastating. Watching themselves laugh about my naivete while planning my involuntary hospitalization shattered their ability to maintain their victim narrative. The forged documents provided concrete evidence of criminal fraud that couldn't be explained away through emotional manipulation. Dad's signature practice sessions, captured on video as he perfected mimicking my handwriting, demonstrated clear criminal intent that would result in felony charges regardless of their claimed motivations. The legal paperwork they had prepared for emergency guardianship contained false statements about my mental health that constituted perjury under state laws. Detective Morrison's involvement transformed their family meeting into a criminal investigation with immediate legal consequences. Her expertise in financial fraud cases meant that their amateur attempts at manipulation were transparently obvious to someone trained in recognizing these patterns. The detectives' calm professionalism contrasted sharply with their increasingly frantic attempts to justify their behavior through emotional appeals and manufactured crises. The psychiatrist they had hired arrived during the middle of this confrontation, expecting to conduct an emergency mental health evaluation that would support their guardianship petition. Instead, he found himself facing potential criminal charges for his role in their conspiracy. Detective Morrison informed him that participating in fraudulent mental health assessments to facilitate financial exploitation was a serious crime that could result in the loss of his medical license in addition to criminal prosecution. Jessica's emotional breakdown was the most dramatic moment of the confrontation. Faced with the reality of criminal charges and the potential loss of custody of Emma and Sophie, she began confessing details of their manipulation that went beyond what I had discovered through my investigation. Her admissions revealed additional financial schemes involving credit cards opened in my name, tax fraud, related to Dad's unreported income, and systematic theft of my personal property that had been sold to fund their lifestyle. Her confession included details about their long-term plans for maintaining control over my life and finances. They had researched psychiatric facilities that specialized in treating successful professionals whose families believed they needed intervention for work addiction and social isolation. The plan was to have me committed for an extended period while they established themselves as my financial guardians and primary caregivers. Dad's reaction to Jessica's confession was rage rather than remorse. He accused her of destroying the family through her inability to maintain their agreed-upon story, insisting that their plans were motivated by genuine concern for my well-being rather than greed. His anger revealed the controlling personality that had orchestrated this entire scheme, treating family members like actors in a play he had written rather than individuals with their own rights and autonomy. Mom's response was more manipulative, attempting to reframe their criminal behavior as misguided love that had gone too far. She claimed that watching me sacrifice my health and happiness for their comfort had become unbearable, leading them to develop increasingly desperate strategies to force me to prioritize my own needs. Her tears seemed genuine, but they were motivated by self-pity rather than remorse for the trauma they had inflicted on me. The legal consequences were swift and decisive. Detective Morrison arrested Dad for fraud, forgery, and conspiracy charges that would likely result in significant prison time given the scope and sophistication of their scheme. Mom faced charges related to theft and conspiracy, though her cooperation with the investigation might reduce her sentence. Jessica's confession earned her consideration for reduced charges in exchange for testimony against her parents. But she still faced serious legal consequences for her role in the conspiracy. But the personal confrontation was more important to me than the legal proceedings. For months I had questioned my own perceptions and judgment, wondering whether my reactions to their behavior were reasonable or evidence of the mental instability they claimed to see. Having concrete evidence of their manipulation and criminal intentions validated my experiences and restored confidence in my ability to assess relationships and make decisions about my own life. The moment when I could finally speak my truth without fear of gaslighting or emotional manipulation was cathartic beyond anything I had expected. I told them exactly how their betrayal had affected me, the way their lies had undermined my sense of reality, and the depth of my anger at their willingness to destroy my mental health for financial gain. Most importantly, I could express these feelings without being told I was overreacting or misunderstanding their motivations. Their reactions to my honest feedback revealed personalities I had never been allowed to see during their performance of loving family members. Dad's entitlement was staggering, his belief that my success obligated me to support their lifestyle, regardless of the personal cost. Mom's selfishness was equally shocking, her assumption that maternal love justified any level of manipulation and exploitation. Jessica's willingness to sacrifice my well-being and traumatize her own daughters for financial gain demonstrated a moral vacancy that explained the ease with which she had participated in their scheme. The recording equipment captured everything, providing documentation that would support the criminal prosecution and protect me from future attempts at manipulation or retaliation. More importantly, having witnesses to their genuine reactions prevented them from later claiming that their behavior was misunderstood or taken out of context. The legal resolution of their crimes unfolded over several months, providing a sense of justice that restored my faith in the possibility of accountability for psychological and financial abuse. Dad's conviction on multiple fraud charges resulted in a 3-year prison sentence, with additional requirements for financial restitution that would continue long after his release. The court ordered him to repay every dollar they had stolen or obtained through deception plus damages for the emotional trauma and professional losses I had suffered during their manipulation. Mom's plea agreement reflected her cooperation with prosecutors and acknowledgement of the damage they had caused. Her sentence included community service specifically focused on educating others about financial abuse, warning signs requiring her to speak at workshops for families about healthy financial boundaries. The irony of her teaching others about the behaviors she had practiced was intentional, designed to ensure that her rehabilitation included genuine understanding of the harm they had inflicted. Jessica's reduced charges came with strict requirements for counseling and supervised parenting classes, since her willingness to use Emma and Sophie as manipulation tools had raised serious concerns about their safety and well-being. The court mandated therapy for the girls to address any psychological damage from being coached to lie about my behavior and witness their family's criminal activities. Child Protective Services would monitor their situation to ensure that Jessica's rehabilitation was genuine rather than another performance designed to avoid consequences. The civil lawsuit recovery exceeded my expectations, not only returning all stolen funds, but providing additional compensation for professional damages and emotional trauma. The court recognized that their manipulation had affected my work performance and career trajectory, awarding damages that reflected both immediate losses and long-term professional impact. Most importantly, the judgment established legal precedent that would protect other victims of family financial abuse by demonstrating that emotional manipulation could result in serious legal and financial consequences for perpetrators. The apartment eviction process was swift and decisive since their residency had been based entirely on my consent, which I withdrew immediately once their crimes were exposed. Watching them pack their belongings and face the reality of supporting themselves without access to my resources was deeply satisfying after months of feeling powerless against their manipulation. The sheriff's supervision of their departure ensured they couldn't steal additional property or attempt final manipulative appeals. But the personal healing process was more complex and meaningful than any legal victory. Therapy with Dr. Rodriguez continued for months, helping me understand the childhood dynamics that had made me vulnerable to their exploitation, while developing strategies for building healthier relationships based on mutual respect rather than one-sided sacrifice. The work was difficult, but transformative, gradually rebuilding self-confidence that had been systematically undermined by their psychological abuse. Reconnecting with friends and colleagues who had been pushed away during my isolation revealed the extent of genuine caring I had missed while focusing exclusively on family obligations. Tom organized a welcome-back celebration when my work performance returned to its previous standards, while Sarah from college helped me process the emotional aftermath through long conversations about trust boundaries and self-worth. These relationships felt fundamentally different from family interactions because they were based on shared interests and mutual support rather than obligation and manipulation. My professional recovery was remarkable once the chronic stress of their abuse was removed from my life. The creativity and focus that had made me successful returned within weeks, leading to promotions and opportunities that had been impossible, while I was emotionally and financially drained by their demands. My supervisor, who had been concerned about my declining performance, was amazed by the transformation and offered additional responsibilities that challenged me in positive ways. The apartment became my sanctuary rather than a source of financial stress and family obligation. I renovated the space to reflect my own preferences rather than accommodating their comfort, creating an environment that supported my goals and interests. Most meaningfully, I decided to rent the second bedroom to a single mother through a nonprofit organization that helped women escape domestic violence, providing safe housing while they rebuilt their lives and achieved financial independence. Meeting David happened naturally through my volunteer work with the domestic violence organization, rather than through dating apps or workplace connections. As the attorney who handled my case, he had witnessed my strength during the confrontation with my family and understood the challenges of recovering from psychological manipulation. Our relationship developed slowly and authentically based on shared values about honesty, respect, and emotional independence rather than need or convenience. The extended family relationships that had been poisoned by my parents' manipulation required careful rebuilding, since they had been told so many lies about my behavior and mental state. Aunt Patricia was horrified to learn the truth about Mom's character assassination campaign and became one of my strongest supporters during the recovery process. Cousin David apologized for believing their version of events and helped me reconnect with other relatives who had been misled about my situation. But perhaps the most meaningful healing came through my work with other survivors of family financial abuse. The support groups Sarah Chen recommended connected me with adults who had experienced similar exploitation by relatives who viewed their success as family property rather than individual achievement. Sharing my story helped other victims recognize manipulation patterns they had missed, while hearing their experiences reinforced that my reactions and decisions had been completely reasonable responses to genuine abuse. The scholarship fund I established for children from financially abusive families became a way to transform my trauma into positive impact for others facing similar challenges. Emma and Sophie were among the first recipients receiving educational support that would help them understand healthy family dynamics and recognize warning signs of manipulation. Their recovery from their mother's coaching was remarkable once they received proper counseling and support. Speaking at conferences about family financial abuse allowed me to educate professionals who work with victims about the sophisticated psychological tactics that make this type of exploitation so difficult to recognize and escape. Many attendees were surprised to learn that successful adults could be vulnerable to family manipulation, assuming that financial resources provided automatic protection against abuse. My presentations helped them understand that emotional manipulation could override logical thinking regardless of education or professional achievement. The life lessons that emerged from this experience were profound and lasting. I learned that real family relationships are based on celebrating each other's success rather than exploiting it for personal gain. Genuine love doesn't require constant proof through sacrifice or tolerance of harmful behavior. Healthy boundaries are essential for maintaining relationships that support rather than drain individual well-being and growth. Most importantly, I discovered that my worth as a person was not determined by my usefulness to others or my ability to solve their problems through financial resources. The relationships that matter most are built on mutual respect, shared values, and authentic caring rather than obligation, manipulation, or convenience. Being someone's rock means they support you too, creating stability through partnership rather than one-sided sacrifice. Today, I live in a beautiful home that truly belongs to me, surrounded by people who value my thoughts, feelings, and dreams rather than just my bank account. My career continues to flourish because I can focus on professional growth rather than family crisis management. The dating relationship with David has evolved into engagement based on shared goals and genuine compatibility rather than emotional neediness or financial considerations. The apartment where my family once lived lavishly at my expense now provides safe housing for women rebuilding their lives after domestic violence, creating positive impact from what was once a source of trauma and exploitation. Emma and Sophie visit occasionally, their personalities bright and authentic now that they're free from their mother's manipulation and lies. They're learning what healthy family relationships look like through their foster placement, with relatives who prioritize their well-being over financial gain. My parents have shown no genuine remorse for their crimes, viewing their punishment as unfair consequences for behavior they still justify as motivated by love and concern. But their inability to accept responsibility for their choices has freed me from any remaining guilt about pursuing legal action or maintaining permanent boundaries around contact. Some people cannot be reformed, only contained through legal consequences and personal boundaries. The golden goose has indeed flown the coop, but rather than being trapped in a nest built on lies and exploitation, I've learned to soar on my own terms. My success belongs to me. My love is freely given rather than manipulated through guilt. And my future is built on authentic relationships that honor my worth as a human being, rather than viewing me as a resource to be harvested. Recovery from family financial abuse is possible, but it requires courage to face painful truths about people we wanted to trust and love. If you recognize yourself in this story, please know that you deserve relationships based on respect rather than exploitation. Professional help is available through family lawyers, therapists, and support organizations that understand these dynamics. You are not responsible for managing other people's lives or sacrificing your well-being for their comfort. The most important lesson is that being generous doesn't require being gullible, and loving your family doesn't mean accepting abuse disguised as need or concern. Real love celebrates your success and supports your goals rather than undermining your confidence and exploiting your resources. You have the right to establish boundaries, seek help, and prioritize your own well-being, without guilt or obligation to people who view your kindness as weakness to be exploited. Have you ever felt like your generosity was being taken advantage of by people who claim to love you? How did you recognize the difference between genuine need and emotional manipulation? I'd love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to help others who might be facing similar situations find the support and validation they need. Consider subscribing to my channel for more stories about overcoming family challenges and building healthier relationships. And please share this video with anyone who might benefit from understanding the warning signs of financial manipulation disguised as family love. Thank you for listening to my story and supporting others who are finding the courage to reclaim their lives from exploitation and abuse. Remember that your worth is not determined by your usefulness to others, and you deserve relationships that celebrate rather than exploit your success and generosity.